In my 30 years as a priest, I've encountered many so-called hauntings. But this house, this place was different. The darkness there felt alive, as if it had intentions of its own. When I walked through those rooms, it was as though the walls were watching, breathing. I tried to cleanse it, but some forces are beyond our reach. To anyone considering stepping foot in that house, I can only say this: some spirits are not meant to be disturbed, and some houses, well, some houses are better left to their secrets.
We've documented hauntings, poltergeists, residual energies. But what's inside that house in Belleville is none of those things. It's something darker, something ancient. The recordings we captured there are chilling, distorted voices, scratching sounds, screams that seem to come from nowhere. If you've ever wondered what true evil sounds like, you'll find it in that house. It doesn't just haunt, it possesses. This is a case we never fully understood, and maybe we never will. My advice? Pray you never find yourself in a place like this.
I was looking for a new start when I found the house on Cannonball Hill, just outside Belleville, Illinois. The place was secluded, surrounded by trees, with a dusty driveway leading up to a 2-story structure that looked as if it hadn't been touched in decades. It was close to my mom's, close to town, but far enough from everything else. Exactly what we needed, or so I thought. On our first day, the house felt strange. Most of the windows on the lower floor were sealed shut, almost as if they were fake. The air smelled stale, thick, and had this faint, metallic scent that lingered no matter how much I aired out the rooms. I figured it was probably just old paint and dust, something a little bit of elbow grease could fix. But then, the water started. I tried running the faucet in the kitchen, but what came out was thick, dark like tar, staining the sink. I panicked, calling out to Glenn, my boyfriend, who was lugging boxes in from the car. He brushed it off as some kind of plumbing issue, but deep down, something felt wrong, unnatural. I ignored it, told myself I was overreacting, and we kept unpacking. It was that night after the kids were asleep when I first noticed the staircase. It hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd seen it before, in my dreams. The same dark wood, the eerie way the shadows seemed to cling to each step. I'd dreamt about it night after night before finding this house, but I'd never put 2 and 2 together. Now, standing there, staring at it in the dim light, I felt an unshakable dread settle over me. Just as I was trying to shake it off, a cold breeze swept through the room, though none of the windows were open. I went to check on the girls, and as I turned the doorknob to their room, I heard a faint whisper coming from somewhere below. I couldn't make out the words, but it sent shivers down my spine. Glenn was asleep on the couch, oblivious, while I stood there in the dark, feeling the air grow colder around me. The next morning, I decided to focus on settling in, hoping a fresh start would help me forget the strange sensations from the night before. But the house seemed to have other plans. As I was unpacking in the kitchen, I heard Brooke and Christy screaming from the bathroom. I ran in, my heart racing, and found them standing by the sink, horrified, pointing at the black sludge pouring from the faucet. The water was thick, dark, and smelled rancid, like rot mixed with something metallic. I grabbed Glenn, who went to look for the shutoff valve, but when we finally got the water off, I could still smell that rancid odor. The walls felt damp, almost as if something were seeping out of them. Then came the lights. As the girls were playing in what would be their new bedroom, the overhead light flickered, dimming as if it were alive, pulsing like a heartbeat. They looked at me, wide-eyed. "Mommy, can we sleep with you tonight?" I let them stay with me, but that night was no better. I'd just drifted off when I felt a sharp tug on my eyelash. Startled awake, I glanced around, certain it was one of the girls, but they were both fast asleep. Just as I was convincing myself it was nothing, I felt it again. A hard tug, followed by a pressure on my chest, like an unseen hand pushing down, pinning me to the bed. I barely slept, and by the time morning light finally crept in, I could still feel the weight, as if something invisible was watching, waiting. Days turned into weeks, but the strange occurrences didn't stop. If anything, they worsened. I began researching the house and asking locals about Cannonball Hill, hoping to find some rational explanation. What I discovered was chilling. Our home sat on what locals referred to as Cannonball Hill, where they buried soldiers from past wars and, rumor had it, miners who had perished in collapsed tunnels beneath the area. It made sense. Belleville was known for its coal mines, and the town's history was littered with accidents and tragedy. As the days passed, more happened. The lights continued to flicker, dimming to a faint glow at random hours, as if mocking me. Glenn dismissed it as faulty wiring, but I knew it was more. Sometimes I'd hear faint whispers, words I couldn't make out, as if they were drifting up from somewhere deep underground. One afternoon, as I was cleaning the living room, I saw Brooke standing at the top of the stairs, her face pale, her eyes wide. She pointed to the darkness behind her and whispered, "Mommy, there's a boy up here." My heart dropped. I ran to her, but there was no one else there, just the chilling emptiness that seemed to breathe with a life of its own. But that night, it got worse. I was lying in bed, dozing off, when I felt it. A weight on my chest, heavier than before, pushing me down. I couldn't breathe. I opened my eyes, and there, in the dimness, was a figure, a shadow, featureless yet solid, looming over me. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. The room was cold, and I could see my breath misting in front of me, swirling as if in response to an unseen presence. When it finally released me, I gasped, stumbling out of bed and turning on every light in the house. But even then, the shadows clung to the walls, watching, waiting. The tension in the house was unrelenting. The black sludge from the faucets, the shadows clinging to the walls, and the sounds I couldn't explain. Each passing day, the atmosphere grew heavier, pressing down on us like a living force. Glenn's behavior had become more erratic too, as if he was slipping away. I noticed his eyes would glaze over, and his voice had taken on a strange, almost otherworldly tone when he spoke. One night, after putting the girls to bed, I was sitting alone in the living room when I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. Glenn was standing there holding an oversized pillow. His eyes were vacant, and a shiver ran down my spine as he moved closer, muttering words I couldn't understand. Suddenly, he threw the pillow over my face, pressing down with terrifying strength. I struggled, gasping, feeling the edges of my vision darken. Somehow, I managed to break free, sprinting out of the room. I hid in the bathroom, too afraid to confront him, too afraid to go back into that living room. In the morning, he didn't remember any of it, acting like nothing had happened. But I knew, whatever was haunting our home was taking hold of him, using him. And then the nightmares returned. They were vivid, haunting. I dreamt of men in black cloaks moving in silence around a wooden crate in the basement. There was chanting, and the sound of something being buried beneath the floorboards. I woke up soaked in sweat, realizing the dreams were more than dreams. They were memories, memories tied to the house, as if the walls themselves were whispering their dark history to me. The days blurred together, each one feeling heavier and more oppressive than the last. The house's dark energy seemed to seep into everything, turning small, everyday tasks into daunting challenges. But one night, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I saw him, the soldier. It was late, past midnight. I'd just dozed off on the couch when I felt the familiar chill. My skin prickled, and I opened my eyes to see him standing by the wall near the fireplace. He wore a tattered uniform, his face ghostly pale, his eyes hollow. I could feel a wave of anger and sorrow radiating from him, like he was trapped in an endless loop of pain. I gasped, trying to scream, but no sound came out. He took a step forward, then another, as if he were about to cross the room toward me. And then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he was gone, leaving behind an icy stillness that made the room feel more like a tomb. The next morning, I told Glenn, but he brushed it off. "You're seeing things, Cindy," he said, but I knew better. The soldier was a warning, a reminder of the darkness that had seeped into every inch of this place. Desperate for help, I reached out to a local priest. After listening to my story, he agreed to visit the house, warning me not to provoke the spirits. But his words felt hollow as I watched him sprinkle holy water around the rooms. Even he looked unsettled, as if he could feel the weight of the house pressing down on him. When he finished, he told me, "It should be fine now. Have faith." But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. The house was alive, and whatever lurked within it had no intention of leaving. The days after the priest's blessing were eerily calm, almost as if the house was waiting. I tried to convince myself that everything was fine, that maybe, finally, we could move on. But deep down, I knew the house was just lying in wait. One night, I was packing away some clothes when I heard Brooke scream from upstairs. I ran to the staircase and saw her stuck midway, as if an invisible force was holding her back. Her little arms flailed, her face frozen in terror as she struggled against something I couldn't see. In a desperate rage, I shouted, "Leave her alone!" and yanked her down the stairs. She fell into my arms, sobbing as a foul, rotting smell filled the air around us. That was it. I was done. I knew we couldn't stay another night in that place. I gathered my things, whispered to Glenn that we were leaving, and took the girls to my mother's. It wasn't the peaceful departure I had imagined, but it was the only way to escape. Days later, I returned one last time, hoping to gather what little remained, but as I entered, I felt that familiar heaviness, that unmistakable presence, lingering just beyond sight. I walked from room to room, trying to shake the feeling, but the walls seemed to pulse with a dark energy. As I reached for the last box, a faint, mocking whisper drifted through the air. "Come back." Without looking back, I left, locking the door behind me. The house, I realized, would always belong to the darkness that lived within it, and we would always carry a piece of that darkness with us.
Long after Cindy and her family abandoned the house on Cannonball Hill, the stories continued to spread, a whispered legend among locals, a chilling mystery to investigators. Padre Lucas and Dr. Mark Evans, each haunted by their brief encounter with the house, never spoke publicly about their experiences again. Yet those who knew them could see the toll it had taken. For Padre Lucas, the encounter left an indelible mark. Parishioners noticed his sermons grew darker, laced with grim warnings about unseen evils. Friends mentioned a new hesitation in his voice, an almost haunted quality. He often spent nights alone in the church, deep in prayer, as if he were guarding against a shadow that lurked just beyond the candlelight. And then, without warning, Padre Lucas resigned from the parish, leaving behind only his prayer book, its pages worn, as if it had been clutched through many restless nights. Dr. Mark Evans continued his work in paranormal investigations, but colleagues remarked on a change in him too. Where he had once been a skeptic, his reports began to read more like personal confessions, filled with unsettling details he refused to explain. Late one night, he recorded a final entry in his case files. "There are forces we are not meant to understand. Some hauntings do not end. They simply wait." Shortly after, he vanished from his office, leaving behind only scattered notes and a tape recorder that played static, punctuated by faint whispers, impossible to trace. To this day, no one knows where they went. Some say the house claimed them both, that its darkness follows those who dare disturb its secrets. Others believe they simply walked away, choosing silence over the truth. But in Belleville, those who pass by the old house on Cannonball Hill swear they still see lights flickering in the windows, And occasionally, if the night is quiet enough, the distant sound of footsteps echoing from within.
Did this mystery send chills down your spine? Then get ready, because we have much more waiting for you. Here at Scary Stories to You, we dive deep into the most terrifying and unexplained tales, uncovering every detail that others fear to explore. If you're brave enough, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. And remember, every like you give brings another dark story to life. See you next time, if you dare to return.